Hey everyone, so today I want to talk about electric vehicles, their future, California's new law, and what all this means. This will be an opinion-based video with some facts. Obviously, I can't see your answers, but I want to ask you a few questions just to get you thinking a little bit. How many of you currently own an electric vehicle? How do you feel about it? Do you like it? Are you satisfied with it? Are there some quirks or any issues you have with it? How many of you are considered buying an electric vehicle as your next vehicle? How many of you refuse and think that gas and diesel engines are the only way to go? Again, I ask these questions knowing that I can't see your answers. If you want, feel free to type them down below. I'm curious. I'd like to see and hear what you think. But I just want to get you thinking about some other opinions that might be out there. So let's go over a few facts about electric vehicles. First, they have less maintenance than gas vehicles, and that's mostly due to less moving parts in their engine. The cost of an electric vehicle is slowly decreasing as the cost of their batteries are decreasing due to efficiency. They also emit zero emissions through their tailpipes. The average American has a round trip to work of less than 30 miles. Electric vehicles use up to 80% of their energy for for the car itself, whereas gas engines only use up to 26% of their energy. In America, the cost of electricity per kilowatt hour is cheaper than a gallon of gas, which estimates have shown around $1,000 annual savings versus owning a gas vehicle. Their batteries can also be recycled, which a lot of people will claim that they can't, but studies have shown that they can. Now, this next bit of facts comes directly from California's website, gov.ca.gov. The California governor has recently announced that the state will be phasing out all of the gasoline-powered vehicles by 2035. Medium and heavy-duty vehicles will be phased out by 2045. This means, and this is a much-needed clarification, this means that all new cars and passenger trucks sold in California will be zero-emission vehicles. The way it had been worded, I honestly thought that you couldn't even buy a used gas-powered vehicle in California, but once I got to reading, I realized you can, but they really don't want you to. It's California's way of fighting back against climate change. And so before I get to my opinions on the facts so far, questions that I have, and some other things, here are some cool electric vehicles that are currently in production and being sold in the United States. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of companies that are selling electric cars in the U.S. I think more than 20 vehicles or something like that, but these are some of them that I thought were kind of cool. The 2021 Ford Mustang Mach-E. I don't believe it should carry the Mustang name, but Mach-E is a good name for it. One thing I don't like is the big screen in the middle of the dash, but that's pretty much on all electric vehicles now. The 2021 Ford F-150 electric truck, the 2020 Jaguar I-Pace, the 2020 Porsche Taycan. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. And then pretty much all of Tesla's 2020 vehicles except for the wretched truck of theirs. That one's horrible. Anyways, so what's my vague opinion on electric vehicles? I know, funny way of wording that. To be honest, at first I thought it was kind of a dumb idea, mostly because of the limited range of electric vehicles and also the expense of the batteries. After doing some research though and seeing what they're all about, I kind of somewhat changed my mind a little bit. I have nothing against them, but I'm definitely not ready to go out and buy one, nor make one my daily driver. Personally, I love the roar of a V8 engine, the sound of turbo spooling, the whine of a supercharger, and the rumble of a nice exhaust, and the 600-mile range that I can get on my truck on the highway. I'm not ready to give all that up yet. Plus, I charge enough things every day, my watch, my phone, 2 computers. I really do not need to add a vehicle to that. So what are some of the pros that I see of gas-powered vehicles? Well, first, they're cheaper to purchase. So if you don't have a whole lot of money up front, a gas-powered vehicle is a little bit better for you. They also have longer range. Even if you have a 12-gallon tank, most of the cars that have 12-gallon tanks have really good fuel economy. Vehicles offer, like my truck has a 36-gallon tank, just not as good of fuel economy. And so you can get anywhere from 275 miles to 650 miles on a tank of gas. Most electric vehicles can't even reach 250. Now, obviously, that's changing. In a few years, this is 2020 right now, but in a few years, it very well could be they're hitting 250, 300 on average. But right now, they're not coming anywhere close to even small vehicles' fuel range. And so far, gas engines are proven. You know which companies have good quality, which companies don't, which companies are performance, and which companies are luxury as far as the types of engines that they offer. That's not really the case with electric vehicles. But with gas engines, there's a lot of options to choose from. You have, obviously your companies and everything, but just for a good example, the current F-150 has a V6 option, 2 twin turbocharged V6 options, a V8 option, and rumor has it a hybrid option along with an electric option are coming into the mix. And that's a lot of options just for one vehicle, especially gas options. You don't really get that kind of electric options, to be honest. You might have a few different versions but throughout a company, but you don't really get that per vehicle. Plus, the biggest thing besides range, obviously that's the number one advantage of a gas engine, but the number two advantage is simply fill up time with gas is a lot faster than the charge time of an electric vehicle. I mean, I can roll up to a pump, fill up 36 gallons of gas in a matter of minutes, say 10 minutes for a long fill up. But a lot of these electric cars, I was looking, and one of the cars, I can't remember what it was, had a 4-hour charge time, but most of them were between 8 and 14 hours. Who has that amount of time if you're rushing to get to work? I couldn't tell you how many people I know that, and even I've done this. Oh, I got 12 miles on my tank of gas. I'll just fill up in the morning before going to work. I don't feel like messing with it right now. You get up in the morning, you're like, oh crap, I got to go to the gas station. You can't do that with an electric car. So you can't forget to charge your car. It's not like charging your phone where it's like, oh, once I get to work, I'll just plug it in. Everything's good. It's not like that. So anyways, gas stations are also everywhere too. Charging stations are few and far in between. So what pros do I see for electric cars? Well, even though they're expensive at first, over a long period of time, they actually end up being cheaper. And part of it is because they have less moving parts than a combustion engine. So there's less to break and go wrong, which obviously means cheaper maintenance. But something that's really cool is, and I'm not going to get to it too much in this video, but the way that when you let off the gas on most gas-powered, the accelerator I should say, when you let off the accelerator on most gas-powered engines, the vehicle just kind of coasts. Well, on electric vehicles, the engine basically, in a sense, slows the car down. And so that actually kind of saves on your brake pads as well, so your brake pads tend to last a little bit longer. Another thing is that it's easier to tie in more technology in the cars because of the type of battery that's being used and the size of the battery. This can also be a con, especially for mechanics. Like, I'll be honest, I used to work on my first few cars by myself because it was so easy. So if I had to change a gasket or something, I could just tear it apart, not a problem. But on my last four vehicles, the amount of, like, even from my 2012 truck to my 2019 truck, the amount of electronic components that have been added in just makes it a huge pain to try to fix something or work on something, even something as simple as changing spark plugs, because you got all this crap in the way. And so yes, electric vehicles have less moving parts and less maintenance, but like some of that tech can just be a pain. Plus, the more tech inside the car, like touch screens and everything else, that may not be as much to go wrong with the engine, but it's more to go wrong for the user. But again, that is a pro for most people in this day and age. They want some of that technology, but it's a con for some people like mechanics and even myself. I do IT work for a daily basis, and I still don't want that much technology in my vehicle. Personal preference. But anyways, so another pro is, from where I'm from, electric is a lot cheaper than gas. So charging your electric vehicle will save you more money than filling up a gas tank. Not to mention, and this is for those of you that like quick vehicles and just like mashing on the gas, electric vehicles have 100% torque through the whole power band, whereas gas and diesel engines, they have a specific spot in that RPM range to get the most power out of that engine. So basically, the power is 100% and instant in electric cars versus not so instant and not 100% in gas vehicles. And a final pro to list off here, it could also be listed as a con as well, depending on how you feel about this topic, but it's easier to create a self-driving car with an all-electric car because, again, the type of battery that's in there, it's easier to pack in more technology, more sensors, and so on and so forth. But that could be a con or a pro. Personally, I'm not ready for self-driving cars yet. I know how technology is. I know how easy it can be to fail. I know how temperamental it can be with updates. I work with it every day. I know how easy it is for it to fail. So if a sensor fails and the driver is not paying attention, because let's be honest, how many drivers actually pay attention on the road today? I drive past somebody, at least 3 people every day that I drive. I drive past at least 3 people is what I'm trying to say. Every day that they're too busy staring at their phones, doing this, going down the road. If they're like that when they're in control of a car, could you imagine how they would be when the car is in control of itself? So if something happens, like I said, I'm not quite ready for that yet. Which car is better though? Well, it's honestly a personal opinion. Like I said, I'm not ready to go 100% in on it, but I think in the next 3 to 5 years, electric could prove to be the better option with how rapid technology has been increasing even over the last decade for these electric vehicles. So who knows? The future will be the one to tell, obviously, but right now I think it's still up in the air, and it's still a personal opinion because I think it depends solely on what the purpose of your vehicle is. Obviously, the purpose of a vehicle is to drive, but if you are somebody that does road trips, you don't want an electric vehicle right now, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, but not today. If you are a trucker, you do not want an electric semi right now. It's not going to get you from Michigan to Texas. It's not in a day, not in 2 days. So, if you're just somebody that travels 2 miles to work and 2 miles back home and makes the occasional grocery run, which is 3 miles away, an electric car probably would be good for you. So I think it really just depends on the purpose of your vehicle. So let's dive into my opinion a little bit more. I think electric vehicles are now a good idea. Like I said, at first I wasn't sold. I thought it was dumb, but even though I think that they're a good idea now, versus my opinion about 6-7 years ago, I just don't think our infrastructure is ready for them yet. The number of charging stations is increasing, but you still have a huge chance of getting stranded. Also, you can't take a road trip without worrying about getting stranded. Like, for example, say you want to go cross country. You're wanting to go 3,000 miles. If your car can only go 250 miles, you're driving roughly 3 to 3.5 hours before you have to pull over, charge for minimum 4 hours. Like I said earlier, most cars are between 8 and 14 hours to charge, fully charge a battery, and you need a fully charged battery for a road trip. You know how many days it's going to take you just to go 1,000 miles? It's silly. Something that you should think about, and this is a far out example, I know it's kind of silly, but think about this. Say you get home and you have 3 miles left on your electric car, So you plug it in and charge it. Pretty standard. 10 minutes later, you get a call that a family member that's 75 miles away is going to the hospital, and you need to get there. What do? You can't get there in your electric car. You only got 3 miles plus whatever that 10 minutes gets you, so you got 3.02 miles. Then a taxi or Uber would be way too expensive for that type of trip. You could call somebody else, but what if they're only 50 miles away and now you have to bring them out of the way and slow them down to getting to see your potentially dying family member? So what do? Again, that's a far out example, but gas-powered engines would be the way to go. You have 5 miles left on your gas tank. You go to the gas station that's 3 miles down the road, you fill up in a matter of minutes, and then you're gone. So, again, it's a far out example, but when you're making a big decision like buying a house, buying a car, you need to think about the what ifs. I'm all about the glasses half full, but you got to consider the what ifs on a big decision. Something else to consider is hacking. It happens to phones, computers, databases, large companies, hospitals, and so on. So your car is not going to be any different. That's kind of scary. Let me be honest. That's kind of freaky to have your car hacked, and you because your car is connected to Wi-Fi overnight, and while it's charging, and you get up the next day to go drive to work, and it decides to do something else. So it's kind of freaky. But anyways, I do like the power of the electric vehicles. I mean, sure, the rumble of a muscle car's V8, yeah, I love that too, but the torque and power of an electric car is second to no gasoline engine, except for some of the supercars and exotics. But the performance you get for a $60,000 electric car can rival a $500,000 exotic. So anyways, I think over the next 5 to 10 years, some of the gasoline exotics will be able to keep up with the electric engines, but after that, I think the electric engines will prove that they're the more powerful ones, especially with acceleration. They're quick. Some of the questions that I have, though, which are mostly aimed at California, are the following. What happens to mechanics and shops who can't work on electric vehicles? This isn't necessarily a training question, like, oh, they just need to be trained and then they'll be good. But this is more of a warranty question, because some shops or some dealers, they're not happy with other shops working on their vehicles, and they can void warranties for things like that. So what happens when these mechanics can't work on these cars because of warranty issues? You're going to start putting mechanics out of jobs, and what do you do about that? That could be a problem. What happens when there's nowhere to put a charging station in a large city such as LA? It's jam-packed downtown. Where can a charging station go? And even if you do find a spot for one, that's not good enough in a city the size of LA or New York, or even a smaller city such as Kansas City. It's still big, obviously, but not quite as big as the other two examples. You can't necessarily pull out the gas station and put a charging station in there, because you still have other gas-powered engines, the used vehicles that still need gasoline. So, how do you handle that? Because, when you're sitting in stop-and-go traffic, you're draining the battery faster than coasting down a highway. What happens to the jobs and the people who begin to lose their jobs as gas stations slow down and start to lose money because less gas-powered engines are being sold and on the road? Not all charging stations will need as many staff members, and some of them won't need any staff members at all. So you got an influx of jobs there. I know California mentioned that they want to try to save jobs, but how? Something else that I think about is the manufacturing of the batteries for these cars. So driving electric cars, they don't put out any emissions, which is great. And manufacturing is roughly the same output of emissions as manufacturing diesel and gasoline engines. But what about the mining and the other stuff to make the batteries? The whole process of manufacturing these batteries could be potentially disastrous. I really haven't found any information, hardly any data actually, that dives deep into this topic. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, I'm not sure, but over the last couple of years I've looked and I'm not really finding much on it. But anyways, I'm curious about the impact of making these batteries, charging the vehicles, which from what I've seen supposedly doesn't really affect uh, power plants that much, but I think that's mostly because you've only got one or two vehicles per power plant at this point. I think once you get a whole city trying to do it, like in California, I think that's where it could be more challenging to maintain the same level of emissions coming from some sort of power plant. So I'm kind of curious as to how that, and then even replacing and recycling the batteries, how all that would affect the climate, because after all, the whole purpose of this move from California was simply to minimize their carbon footprint impact on climate change and make the air cleaner. That's one of the things that they had mentioned was that gas engines make the air dirty. And so, I'm kind of curious because, and something else to consider is when it comes to replacing your car's battery in 7 to 10 years, is it better to buy a new vehicle or is it better to replace the battery? And here's why I ask that. You're spending $50, $60, $70,000 on an electric vehicle. Now, some of them are 30 and 40,000, but say you spend $50,000 average on an electric vehicle, and the batteries cost about $10,000. So in 10 years, when your vehicle is worth a couple $1,000 and the battery is going to be cost more than what your vehicle's worth, what do? Do you scrap the vehicle? Do you replace the battery? Do you sell the vehicle and hope that the next person doesn't scrap it? It's just, how's this impacting? How does this actually help contribute to the end goal? I'm kind of curious as to how this impact is and if it would actually meet the goal that California is trying to get to, or if if the emissions would end up in 20 years not changing. They're just shifting from one spot to another, but they're not actually getting better. I'm just kind of curious because once you get a whole state, once you get several million people doing this, what's the actual impact? So I'm just kind of curious. Those are some of the questions that I have. I'm sure after I publish this video, I'll come up with a few more questions. I always do. Every time I edit a video and then publish it, I always go, man, I forgot something. So anyways, overall, I do think that electric vehicles will be a huge part of the future. However, unless other states mandate the same laws or similar laws as what California has done, I do not believe that electric will be the only engine in the future. I think that it'll take several decades to phase out gas engines. My next vehicle will probably still be a gas engine, and if it's not, I'll be sure to find a second car, cheap car that is a gas-powered engine, just in case. I'm still not 100% sold and ready to go all in on an electric car or an electric truck. With that being said, leave your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching and be sure to like and subscribe.